Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Movies from A to Z. And this week we're doing the letter Q. And I'm trying to fortify my video making with a little drink here. This is a combination of Coke and hot cinnamon schnapps. Hot damn. Perfect way to celebrate a nice, quiet summer evening. So, the letter Q stands for... It doesn't stand for Queen of Blood, nor does it stand for Queen of the Amazons. It doesn't even stand for the Queen of England, although it probably should. No, this stands for, as I promised you last week, the one and only Queen of Outer Space, sometimes known by its alternate title, Zsa Zsa Gabor Makes a Movie. Okay, 1958, classic science fiction movie. In a decade of many classic science fiction movies, but this is just great fun because it's a spoof on all those movies, and it's in CinemaScope, beautiful color, and it has Zsa Zsa. What else do you need? You may think that your life is complete if you haven't seen this movie, but you would be wrong, because this is what cinema is all about, right? Forget Citizen Kane. What you need is the Queen of Outer Space. Okay, so what is the plot? Who cares? The plot is about three astronauts from Earth, one of whom was played by Eric Fleming, who later became famous on Rawhide, and they are transporting a scientist played by Paul Birch, who was known for another famous science fiction role. He was the space vampire from Not of This Earth, okay, with Beverly Garland, directed by Roger Corman. Anyway, so they're transporting a scientist to a space station, which looks like an early version of Deep Space Nine, orbiting above the Earth. Sounds like a very simple mission, but while they're up there, they get attacked by these strange atomic rays from somewhere in space that destroy the space station, and then they grab a hold of the rocket ship that these guys are in, and they pull them all the way to the planet Venus, right? Which everybody thought that Venus was uninhabited and totally uninhabitable, but as it turns out, it has a perfect atmosphere. They don't need their spacesuits. It has the right amount of gravity. It has beautiful vegetation everywhere, and it has beautiful women. As it turns out, Venus is a planet controlled by women. They have had this terrible war that destroyed millions of lives, and while the war was going on, some of the women decided to start a revolution, and they were so angry with the men who had caused, this is an early feminist statement film, really. They were so angry with the men who had started all this violence and destruction that they took over the planet. They killed most of the men, but a lot of them they exiled to a prison planet where they have to work, right? So, but not every woman who's left on this planet is happy about the fact that there are no longer any men. So they're not. It's all is not pleasant on this planet, but it is being controlled by mysterious Queen Ilyana, played by Laurie Mitchell, who wears a mask, and nobody knows what she looks like under the mask, but she's rumored to be very beautiful, and she rules the planet with an iron fist, but there is a growing resistance movement which is waiting for a chance to take over. So when these men show up on the planet, some of the women are energized to the point where they want to overthrow the planet and bring back the men. So now Zsa Zsa Gabor does not play the Queen of Outer Space, although she does become the queen at the end of the film. But I don't want to give away any big secrets here. She plays a scientist named Talia, who is part of the resistance movement. So she falls in love with Eric Fleming. He falls in love with her. The Queen falls in love with Eric Fleming. It gets very, very dramatic. We're talking, what are we talking? We're talking Shakespearean drama here. Sure we are. Okay, so this is sort of a continuation of a genre of films where women, people from Earth, go to a planet and discover that there are nothing but beautiful women, right? This has been done before in films like Catwoman of the Moon and its remake Missile to the Moon, which was also done the same year as Queen of Outer Space. Fire Maidens from Outer Space. This has all been done before. Um, but it's just great fun. All the women are, dressed up in Hollywood type clothing with very short skirts and high heels and jewelry and lots of makeup. So it's a Hollywood fantasy all the way. However, Zsa Zsa's wardrobe was made only for Zsa Zsa. Miss Gabor's wardrobe was made just for her. The filmmakers, this was made at Allied Artists, which of course had originally been Monogram Pictures, and they were specialized in doing low budget films. But they utilized some sets and costumes from other films, like Forbidden Planet. They used some of the costumes that were worn by Anne Francis. You can recognize them as you see some of the women running around in this show, and also the astronauts. They wear the same clothes that Leslie Nielsen and the other guys wore in Forbidden Planet. They also use things from other films like Abbott and Costello Go to Mars, World Without End, and an earlier Monogram science fiction low-budget film called Flight to Mars. So it's just great fun to watch. And they do their own version of the killer giant spider, which you see also in Catwoman of the Moon and in Missile to the Moon. Very badly constructed giant spiders, which are supposed to be jumping out of this behind a rock in a cave and trying to kill people, right? But the giant spider in this one, it looks like a big rubber cushion. It's not very frightening at all. But they sort of propel the thing out from behind a rock, and it lands on some guy, and he's supposed to be thrashing around in terror while this rubber spider is just kind of doing nothing. Reminds you of Bela Lugosi with the fake octopus at the end of Bride of the Monster. Pretty much the same thing. So the film was directed by a guy named Edward Burns. That's Bernds, who was known for directing a lot of Three Stooges films. And then he also directed some science fiction classics like World Without End and Return of the Fly. Okay? And the story actually came from an idea by the very famous and prolific journalist, author, and screenplay writer Ben Hecht, who had done a lot of really prestigious films in his time, like The Front Page, Scarface, Wuthering Heights, 2 films for Hitchcock, Spellbound, and Notorious. Well, he had come up with an idea for a story back, I think, in the 1940s. It was called Queen of the Universe, and it was just sort of a comedic story. And it was sort of recycled for this film, and they changed a lot of things. And the screenplay was done by a guy named Charles Beaumont, who I guess had written a lot of science fiction novels. And so it was a vehicle for Zsa Zsa Gabor, who at that time in her life, I mean, she had already been around forever. She had been Miss Hungary in 1936. She had a career on stage. She was a singer. She had acted in Vienna on the stage. And then after coming to the United States with her mother and her other 2 sisters, she had already gone through 3 husbands and started acting in films in America in 1952. And for a while, she was doing some prestigious things like Moulin Rouge and Lily and The Girl in the Kremlin. But as time went on, her parts got smaller and her films got smaller as well. But she was very famous during all those years for being famous, for being a celebrity and being beautiful and being very funny. She was always on television. She was on game shows and talk shows, things like that, and ended up being married 9 times. I always liked her. I thought she was really just an interesting image and certainly very funny most of the time. But she, let's see, what else I want to say? Okay, so the very same, interesting little piece of trivia here. The same year that Zsa Zsa Gabor made Queen of Outer Space, she did a very small part in an Orson Welles now classic film called Touch of Evil. She was in it for maybe 1 hot minute, right? Now, there's another actress who is unbilled in Queen of Outer Space. She doesn't play one of the women on the planet, but she has a role as a beautiful woman who's saying goodbye to one of the astronauts before the ship takes off. So she has a nice, beautiful close-up. She's very beautiful and sexy. Her name is Joy Lansing, and she was one of the blonde bombshells from the 1950s that was sort of patterned after Marilyn Monroe, like Mamie Van Doren, Jane Mansfield. Joy Lansing was in a lot of TV shows and a lot of films. And she was also in Touch of Evil. Now, if you remember the very famous opening shot of Touch of Evil, where you have this convertible, this long tracking shot where a convertible is driving through the city, where Charlton Heston and Janet Leigh are walking almost right next to it, and there's a man driving with a beautiful blonde sitting next to him, and the beautiful blonde keeps saying, "I hear something ticking," before the car finally blows up. Joy Lansing was the blonde sitting in that car. So that's your bit of very crucial trivia for that night, and I've kept you for 10 minutes. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you think of Queen of Outer Space. All right? Comments are welcome. Good night.